Welcome to Compact Warfare from compactwarfare.com, formerly known as 5-Minute Warfare, the show where we explore key moments from the history of conflict, from ancient battlefields to modern warfare. This is episode 34, the Viking Raids. Picture the scene. You live in a quiet coastal village, the sun is rising, and suddenly, dark shapes appear on the horizon. Sleek wooden ships with curved, dragon-like prows glide toward the shore. You've heard the rumors, and now they're real. The Vikings have arrived. For nearly 3 centuries, the sight of Viking ships struck fear across Europe. But who were these Norse raiders, and why did they unleash such a storm of violence, conquest, and exploration? Let's set sail and dive into the history of the Viking Raids. The word Viking often brings to mind images of brutal warriors with horned helmets, although for the record, those helmets are pure myth. In reality, the term Viking refers more to the act of raiding than to a specific group of people. But over time, it became shorthand for the seafaring warriors and explorers from Scandinavia, namely what we now call Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. The Viking Age spanned from the late 8th century to the mid-11th century. It was an era defined by bold exploration, brutal raids, and ambitious expansion. The Norsemen travelled far beyond their cold, rugged homelands, driven by the promise of wealth, new land, and adventure. The event often seen as the start of the Viking Age happened in 793 AD. A group of Norse raiders attacked Lindisfarne, a monastery off the northeast coast of England. They stormed ashore, sacked the monastery, killed monks and made off with treasure and supplies. For Christian Europe, it was a terrifying sign of things to come. Monasteries, often rich but poorly defended, became easy targets. But the Norse didn't limit themselves to religious sites. Towns, villages, and even cities across Britain, Ireland, France, and beyond found themselves in the Vikings' crosshairs. So why did the Vikings start raiding? Historians believe there were several reasons. First, overpopulation and limited resources back in Scandinavia made life tough. The harsh climate and rocky terrain meant there wasn't enough farmland to go around, especially for younger sons with little to inherit. Second, Europe offered tempting opportunities. Coastal settlements and monasteries were full of gold, silver, livestock, and other valuables. And then there were the potential slaves. Human captives were highly prized in the Viking world. Third, the Vikings had a technological edge. Their longships were fast, flexible, and perfectly suited for both open sea voyages and river navigation. That meant they could strike deep inland with surprising speed, leaving before any serious defense could be organized. There were also cultural factors. Viking society valued bravery, honor, and warrior skill. Raiding wasn't just about survival, it was about reputation and glory. Over time, those early raids evolved into more organized invasions. By the 9th century, Viking armies were setting up permanent bases and even claiming land. In the British Isles, Norse settlers established the Danelaw, areas under Viking control that stretched across parts of what is now England. In Ireland, they founded towns like Dublin, and their influence reached Scotland, Wales, and the Isle of Man. In France, Viking raids intensified, culminating in the siege of Paris in 845 AD. The French king paid the invaders to leave, but their presence was impossible to ignore. By the early 10th century, the Vikings secured land in what became Normandy, named after the Norsemen who settled there. The Vikings didn't stop with Western Europe. They sailed along the Iberian coast, entered the Mediterranean, and ventured deep into Eastern Europe. Norse traders and warriors travelled the rivers of modern-day Russia, creating trade networks that stretched as far as the Byzantine Empire. Some even joined the elite Varangian Guard, serving as personal bodyguards to the Byzantine Emperor. The most daring voyages took them across the North Atlantic. Norse settlers colonized Iceland, Greenland, and even reached North America, though those settlements didn't last long. The Viking raids changed Europe in countless ways. They forced kingdoms like Anglo-Saxon England to improve their defences, leading to the rise of strong leaders such as Alfred the Great, who resisted Viking invasions. The raids also accelerated cultural exchange. The Norse brought not just violence, but trade, language, and customs that blended with the regions they touched. And of course, their reputation for brutality became legendary. While the raiders were certainly capable of extreme violence, they were also skilled craftsmen, navigators, and traders. By the late 11th century, the Viking Age began to fade. Several factors contributed to this. Scandinavian kingdoms became more centralized and converted to Christianity, reducing the incentive for raiding. European defenses improved, making attacks riskier, and Norse society itself shifted focus towards settlement, trade, and political alliances. The final chapter of Viking aggression is often marked by the year 1066. That year saw the last major Viking raid in England and the Norman conquest, led by descendants of Viking settlers who had made Normandy their home. The legacy of the Viking raids is still visible today. From place names across Britain and Ireland to archaeological finds, Norse influence remains woven into European history. Their story is not simply one of destruction, but of ambition, innovation, and exploration. The Vikings were raiders, yes, but also settlers, traders, and seafarers who reshaped the medieval world. Their longships no longer glide across the waves, but the legends of the Viking raids continue to sail through history. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Compact Warfare from compactwarfare.com. If you did, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.